Okay, if we'll all take our seats, we'll go ahead and begin. We do have a quorum here.
Just barely.
3, 4, 5, just makes it. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the July 22nd ACPT meeting. And we'll go around the board and go around the loop here. Okay, that's a good word. And introduce ourselves. We'll begin with Brad.
I'm Brad Miller with PSTA.
Cassandra Borchers with PSTA.
Lee Royal, Department of Transportation.
Jim Kennedy, City of St. Petersburg City Council, representing the TPC.
Jeff Danner, St. Pete City Council, representing T-Barton.
Harriet Crozier, Commissioner with the City of Largo, representing MPO.
Ken Welch, County Commissioner, representing PSTA.
Julie Ward-Pajolski, Vice Mayor, City of Dunedin, representing MPO. Sarah Ward, MPO staff.
Bob Clifford, T-Barton.
Linda Fisher, Pinellas Planning Council staff, filling in for Meg Crawford.
Oh, good.
Karen
And
Seal, Pinellas County Commission.
all right, great. Glad to have everyone here. Thank goodness it's cooler in here than outside. With that, the first thing we'll begin with is the approval of the minutes of the June 10th meeting. Any corrections?
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Whoops, did I go too fast?
So I
Do you
wanted
have a
to,
correction?
no, I wanted to ask a question as to the MPO is in the process of running travel demand model for projected ridership.
What
And
page is it?
that's the bottom of page 5.
Okay.
And I was just
Curious what that was?
wondering what the status.
Okay.
Let me get with our modeling folks. It's a joint effort between the MPOs and DOT, so I need to find out when it might be an appropriate time to bring that forward. I think they're just starting. They've not actually started to run the model. We're in the process of looking at the SE data, the population, employment. Those are all inputs to the model. But I will get an answer to you and let you know when we will bring before this group.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. We will now move on and PSTA/MPO land use and scenario efforts. And we'll begin with Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to walk you through an update that I think everyone on this board has seen, except for Madam Chair. So, in your honor, I will present an update. We did give this presentation to the MPO board about a week ago, so it's very similar. I'm going to try to walk you through some of the highlights relatively quickly. Really want to give you guys an opportunity to have a discussion on some of the concepts that are coming out of this work effort. So we've been coming to the ACPT and providing information on some of the early outreach efforts, going out to the business community, talking to community leaders. We gave you an update on the charrette process. All of those elements are really doing two things. They're guiding the scenario planning for the MPO as they develop their long-range transportation plan, as well as continue to inform the green light process. So we had the design charrettes. We discussed that before. Just as a reminder, we had a design charrette for 7 different stations along the light rail corridor for the Pinellas AA. They were invitees brought to the table. 5 people sat at a table with a designer and a facilitator, and we spent half a morning talking about ideas about the station and land uses around the station. So a good example of some of the products that we got out of that event is shown here. The thing that I like the most, and I think is really the most important aspect of this exercise, is the conversation. Not so much the pictures, but what people were saying about the different station areas. What things they felt were important, or what were the values they need to be maintained and or transformed around those station areas. So what I do want to show you guys today is updates on some of those images. I'm going to walk you through each one of them. I'll also talk about some of the words that were used during the design charrette to describe these different concepts and some of those key values moving forward. So what you see here on the screen is the concept plan design, as we call it, for the Clearwater South Station. This is near Morton Plant. North is actually to the left, so you're looking at Fort Harrison to Myrtle, left facing north. You know, a lot of the different ideas or concepts that were discussed in relation to Clearwater was that they wanted to create this robust multimodal network that was really focusing around both the history of Clearwater while connecting into those medical uses, of course, pairing off of Morton Plant Hospital. So this is a perspective rendering of that concept design. You know, again, you know, they were really focusing on a cafe district. The Pinellas Trail, of course, was a big component of the station area. Grand plazas, grand boulevards, and really this sort of gateway to Morton Plant itself. So the next design charrette was for the Largo Town Center. Again, to give you some sense of orientation, north in this case is actually to your right. US 19, you can see there going through the center of the picture, and East Bay Drive is actually on that north-south access there. Some of the things that we heard about the Cloud Station, as they called their design, was they wanted to be progressive, futuristic, mixed-use community centered around green industry that really incubates small businesses. And again, some the artist renderings of what that station could potentially look like. We're really starting to see some similarities here. We heard time and time again that greenways, landscaping, and inclusion of all the different green amenities was really important throughout the corridor. Looking at the commuter amenities, making sure it's people-friendly, and there's definitely a focus on arts and entertainment in this particular concept or design. The next station is Bay Vista. For Bay Vista, they were looking at, there was a lot of focus on safe pedestrian access, of course, getting across Roosevelt Boulevard. Again, orientation north is to your right in this picture. They were also very focused on lush park-like setting and bicycle amenities. And some of the key values associated with this particular design was they wanted sidewalks, trails, redevelopment, multifamily, restaurants and retail, and really a gateway to Largo. Next design charrette was for the airport. The title of this winning design was the Aero Venture Landing. Here we heard about transportation hub, strong industry and commercial uses that pleasantly connect visitors to employers, tourist destinations, the airport, and all other major destinations. You can again see some of those green corridors through the center of the image. And the red arrow is definitely a part of the conversation pretty heavily throughout the design charrette, across all the designs, making sure that there was a direct connection from this particular station area into the airport. This is the artist rendering of that perspective of that station area. Again, some of the things we heard from the participants were employment, a tech incubator, hotels, retail, again, the tram to the airport, and a tourist hub.
Scott, can
Yes.
I ask a question?
Sure.
Go back to that last one.
This one?
Yeah, in just about every rendering, we're seeing a building with flags on it. Is that supposed to be a new flag, or? I'm not getting in the discussion, St. Pete, but are we moving the ball field in this middle? Did anybody notice that? We did, and it just seemed kind of, each rendering has something with flags on it. I just wondered if.
Maybe the artist preference.
It could be, all right, they have the same artist, I guess, okay. All right, that was their trade. Go on.
We actually found one of the renderings. I don't think we have it here today, but apparently one of my staff got made into the picture too. She likes to add little trinkets to the designs, I suppose. The next is the Greater Gateway area. Again, north is to your right. You can see Roosevelt Boulevard there. The way they described their design was to create a net that captures transit users, bicyclists, pedestrians, connects employment to homes and activities, that's clean, sustainable, and a balance between natural and commercial spaces. The next station is Park Place, so this is near the shops at Park Place. North is closer to true north in this particular orientation. You can see Gandy and US 19 there. The design itself is called the Hub, and they wanted a 24-hour mixed-use district, which reflects the location as the hub of Pinellas and as well as the region. And a lot of the values that they brought forth in their concept was parks, again, parks and greenways, transit circulators, connection to the beaches, connections to the medical district, multi-level transportation center, and pedestrian safety. Pedestrian safety was definitely a big part of the conversation for this station area. As you can imagine, sort of getting across US 19 was a major concern. So that's some of the designs that we have to date. We're going to continue to bring you more designs as we refine them. We're anticipating September timeframe to have a full package and brochure that will also include a package of computer renderings to go along with the artist drawings. So we're going to have a full complement from day of to hand-drawn sketches to sort of more photorealistic computer renderings. Some of the other activities associated with the design charrette is scenario planning, as I mentioned, for the MPO. One of the scenarios in particular, informally has been called the green light land use scenario. And what we're looking at there, the purpose of that scenario is we're really looking at creating jobs, looking at access to those job centers, and looking at the communities. Where are the stable neighborhoods, and focusing growth around that infrastructure, around those centers of activity. And not only that, but we're obviously coordinating this with the MPO plan, but with the PPC plan as well. And it's really all three of those elements, green light, the MPO, and the PPC, coming together under this one particular scenario. You can see a representation here. The scenario 3, the green light land use scenario, is anticipating an increase in overall population and job growth. If you can see on the right-hand side, that image there is showing in the darker colors, the red, the yellow, the increase in density around that core spine of activity. So we looked at a couple of different metrics to essentially validate the scenario and make sure that we understand the benefits that are being brought forth from looking at the scenario. We looked at some of the things that the PPC is looking at targeted employment areas. Those are both commercial, but a heavy influence or focus on industrial uses. We also looked at the activity centers, the traditional activity centers like you can imagine, Clearwater and downtown St. Pete. We looked at premium roadways. So these are principal arterials or some of your interstates. We also looked at, of course, the transit component. As you can see here to the left is the trend scenario, which we're basing our comparison on. The scenario here, the scenario 3, the difference in color that you're seeing, the orange versus the blue, is routes with frequency 15 minutes or more. So you can see a major difference between the trend scenario and what we're showing for scenario 3, which is the community bus plan, which you guys have been discussing here. The blue is the LPA. And what we're seeing from that analysis is several different data points that I'm just throwing up here in summary, kind of the scenario by the numbers. We're talking about 95,000 more households within this scenario, specifically more households in relationship to those employment and activity centers. Increase in job density. Within half a mile of that roadway network that I described, those principal arterials, 1.5 times more job density within half a mile of those roads. 2.5 times more population density within those primary roadway network. 30% increase in both population and employment density within 1/4 mile of those PSTA routes. And 1/4 mile is a good litmus test or a good judge for distance because that's easily walkable. So you can see the increase there. When we start looking at the more premium transit routes and the locally preferred alternative, now what we're seeing in the scenario is 2.5 times more job density within 1/4 mile of those routes and 3.5 more times in population density. So we're talking about a substantial shift in the way we're evaluating that growth potential for Pinellas County and focusing it around that infrastructure, not just transit, but roadways as well. And with that, that concludes my updates, and I'll take any comments.
Any questions? Thank you for
Thank you.
showing that. Oh,
When do you anticipate putting dollar figures with these plans for stations?
The cost for each individual station?
Yes.
We do have costs associated with each station in the local preferred alternative. So in the AA, we did develop costs for station areas. Are you talking about the infrastructure?
Well, and how do you connect these diagrams to those costs and bring them together?
Well, the diagrams themselves were more representative of larger concepts, but then as far as the infrastructure, those costs are in the AA. So we can tie those to these different station areas, just as long as those that are seeing the images understand that there's a lot more in there than just the cost of the rail line. You know, we're talking about increase in population density, employment density, and a lot of different elements around that station area.
And I understand that you've got the costs over here and you got design, and I see them going on parallel tracks and not necessarily checking in on one another.
Understood. Yeah, I think the focus of this exercise was to have that conversation, get people thinking about what a station could look like. Again, there's still a lot of hard engineering that needs to take place to get the ultimate cost for a station area like this. And not only that, but it may not always tie directly to the rail proposal, but it affects and influenced by the jurisdiction that the station's in.
Are you going to attempt to connect them closer before we get the presentation finalized, and where's your time frame?
We're looking at September timeframe to complete this, essentially where we have a brochure of these different station concepts. The AA's are done, so we have those costs. I think we would probably look to greenlight committees to make sure that we're comparing these details appropriately.
Okay, thanks.
I think, Mr. Kennedy, you're correct. They are parallel non-crossing paths at this point, and it, as Scott described, we want to make sure we present these land use designs and concepts in a way that doesn't that does inspire folks to help understand the investment in transit better and how it can affect land use, but it doesn't promise that palm tree in the middle of US 19. Scott is stating that we have put into the capital cost budget placeholders for not only the station infrastructure itself, but for related pedestrian and landscaping and other roadway types of improvements around the stations. So we think we have in the total dollars funding that is similar to this, but it will be beyond September of 2013. It'll be on November of 2014 when the individual cities take over and actually develop the land use plans and infrastructure plans so that whether it looks exactly like that or something different materializes. I don't think you'll see that true costing of all of the infrastructure shown until outside of the current phase that we're in now.
Okay. Good, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Well, I think, are you going to introduce?
Yeah, I would say actually that's a perfect segue because we've asked Carol Strickland from the City of Largo to talk about some of those continuing efforts related to the station areas that the jurisdictions are working on now.
Good afternoon, I'm Carol Strickland. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Largo, and thank you, Councilman Kennedy, for the lead-in. What I want to talk about is what needs to happen at the local level, at the municipal level and in unincorporated Pinellas County to kind of take it from the very conceptual station area vision and the economic development that could come from that to something very specific that can be priced, funded, coded, built. And what we realized going forward is as you begin to seek funding from the Federal Transit Administration, FTA is looking for the local jurisdictions to be transit ready and to have done that in a coordinated way. So when they're looking at an application for a system, they really are not interested in looking at Largo's doing this and St. Petersburg's doing that. They want to know at a system level, what are the plans for transit-oriented development? Are the land use codes in place? Are the plans in place to make this a successful system? So what I wanted to introduce to you briefly is how we go forward from some very inspiring visions, perspectives of what development around stations could look like, to the hard work of doing the detailed planning and being ready for that FTA application. And I've been talking with my counterparts in the 4 municipalities in unincorporated Pinellas County about how we as the locals might kind of take that ball and move forward with it, building on the work that the MPO and PSTA has started, but really owning it and making it a local initiative. We'll be having our last coordinating committee for the charrette planning effort on August 2nd, a week from Friday, where we're going to talk more formally about how we are organized to do that planning work going forward. But essentially, the idea is that there would be a kind of a local government working group, that it would be led by the local governments that have stations in their jurisdiction, that we would use it to coordinate our work so that we go through the station area planning process with a similar approach, that we're talking the same language, that we're undertaking some of the same planning activities. As you're probably aware, all of the local jurisdictions have taken the transit-oriented development policies and put them in their comprehensive plans, and it's a great first step. But really, we've got a lot of work to do to take those TOD policies and put them in our comprehensive development code, land development code. We have to look at specific station area planning projects. And as Scott mentioned, when the engineering for the system is done, we'll know physically where those stations are going to be, what side of the road, are they elevated, what parcel, and then you can actually do very specific station area plans that get into things like where does the parking go, what type of pedestrian improvements, what type of local transportation improvements, and start to put those in your CIP. So I guess to summarize, the product would be a station area plan book. When I was talking with Dave Goodwin in St. Petersburg, and we were talking about, we have this sort of coordination process, what is it at the end we have? And he said to me, he said, wouldn't it be great when we went to FTA if we had a single book for the whole system, and you could open it up, and in the same format, you could see what each jurisdiction has planned to make those visions actually become stations that are built, and how are they in your codes? Or do you have urban design guidelines? Do you have the infrastructure plan? So we're looking at forming some type of working group, probably meeting quarterly initially to begin the conversation as we come up to the referendum. In Largo, for example, in the fiscal year 15, we are putting money in our CIP to start doing more specific station area plans, but wouldn't plan to move forward with that level of detail until we know that the system's going forward and we get into the engineering aspect of it. I am proposing that working group be supported by a consultant, be staffed, because all of us local planners are pretty busy and feel like we could use some assistance. So we'll be discussing the scope of services and be asking each of the jurisdictions to provide some nominal level of funding to support a consultant to assist us in that process and build upon the work that's already been done. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
If we were looking at one of those maps that says you are here, where are we in terms of finalizing the station locations? For example, Bay Vista and Cloud Station. How close are we to saying that will be in fact the location?
That's probably a better question for Scott, but based upon my experience, until you get into the engineering evaluation for the system and you start to really look at from a design perspective, where is the alignment, where is it elevated, where does it land, you would not really know where exactly that station's going to be, what parcel it's going to be on. So until you get well into the EIS process and know specifically where those stations are, we wouldn't get into the design work around it for parking and pedestrian improvements and so on.
Thank you.
And that is the point, and I actually had a discussion with somebody the other day. The type of technology, the station location, et cetera, will have to go through the NEPA process, the EIS, Environmental Impact Study. You can't go into that process with a firm, this is where we've determined the locations, this is the technology that we've determined. To my knowledge, you have to wait till you go through that process so that it considers the federal review of your environmental impact. Is that correct?
Exactly.
You cannot predetermine these things.
Right. You can't predetermine a lot of that. So that's going to be hard to explain to the public, but we need to be able to explain that that's going to be the next step.
So these are the recommended locations, and we don't have a, like a variance. It could be half a mile away, a mile away, based on experience. I mean, how do you put some number around?
So the locally preferred alternative that you had approved, and that has been reviewed and accepted by the Federal Transit Administration, had those circles. Approved those 16, that there would be 16 stations in this half-mile radius.
Was it a half mile?
Was it a half mile?
Half mile.
Half-mile radius
Okay.
locations.
Okay.
It's not a problem. In fact, I think it's essential that we present these sorts of land use descriptions to people so that they understand what this is about, and to describe these as this is our plan. This completely complies with the alternative analysis. Are we promising that the station is going to be at this exact spot shown here? No, but we shouldn't worry about the NEPA process or getting in trouble or something like that by just highlighting these renderings, which were completely developed through a vast public involvement process with the landowners and developers and planners from right where the people that know exactly about this.
Don't take a negative.
No, I know. I don't want anyone to be concerned that we can't say anything, that these are just...
No, we just need to be precise from